Hi everyone, this is Glenda Ganzon and welcome to my Human Anatomy and Physiology class. And for today's video, I'm gonna be discussing the female reproductive system. So stay tuned! The female reproductive system is designed to carry out several functions. It produces the female egg cells necessary for reproduction, which is called the ova or oocytes. The system is also designed to transport the ova to the site of fertilization. Conception, which is the fertilization of an egg by the sperm, normally occurs in the fallopian tubes. The next step for the fertilized egg is to implant into the walls of the uterus, beginning the initial stages of pregnancy. And if the fertilization or implantation does not take place, the system is designed to menstruate, the monthly shredding of the uterine lining. In addition, the female reproductive system produces female sex hormones that maintain the reproductive cycle. The function of the external female reproductive structures, which are the genitals, is twofold: to enable the sperm to enter the body and to protect the internal genital organs from infectious organisms. So the main external structures of the female reproductive system include as follows. So the first structure is the mons veneris. The mons veneris is a pad of fat tissues over the symphysis pubis, and it has a covering of coarse, curly hairs and pubic hair. It also protects the pubic bone from trauma. The second is the labia minora. The labia minora is a spread of two connective tissue folds that are pinkish in color, and the internal surface is composed of mucous membrane and external surface is skin. It also contains sebaceous glands all over the area. Another is the labia majora. Lateral to the labia minora are two folds of fat tissue covered by loose connective tissue and epithelium, which is the labia majora. Its function is to protect the external genitalia and the distal urethra and vagina from trauma. It also covered with pubic hair that serves as additional protection against harmful bacteria that may enter the structure. Another structure of the external female reproductive system is the vestibule, and it is a smooth flattened surface inside the labia wherein the openings to the urethra and the vagina arise. Another structure is the clitoris. It is a small circular organ of erectile tissue in front of the labia minora. The prepuce, which is a fold of skin, serves as its covering, and this is the center of sexual arousal and pleasure for females because it is highly sensitive to touch and temperature. Another structure is the skin's glands. Also, this is called as the pyorethral glands, and they are found lateral to the urethral meatus and have ducts that open into the urethra. And it secretes from the gland, lubricate the external genitalia during coitus, or what we call as the sexual intercourse. Another is Bartholin's gland, and it is also called vulvovaginal gland, and this is another gland responsible for the lubrication of the external genitalia during coitus or sexual intercourse. It has ducts that open into distal vagina. Both of these gland secretions are alkaline to help the sperm survive in the vagina. And the next one is the fourchette or fourchette. This is a ridge of tissue which is formed by the posterior joining the labia minora and majora. During the episiotomy, this is the tissue that is cut to enlarge the vaginal opening. And lastly is the perineal body, and this is a muscular area that stretches easily during childbirth. Most pregnancy exercises such as Kegels exercise and squatting are done to strengthen the perineal body to allow easier expansion during the childbirth and avoid tearing the tissue. And of course, lastly, the hymen. This covers the opening of the vagina, and it is, though elastic, semicircle tissue torn the first sexual intercourse. For the internal structure of the female reproductive organ, first we have the vagina. Vagina is a canal that joins the cervix, which is the lower part of the uterus, to the outside of the body, and it is also known as the birth canal. The next are the ovaries. The ovaries are ultimate life maker for females. For its physical structure, it has an estimated length of 4 cm and width of 2 cm and is 1.5 cm thick. It also appears to be shaped like an almond, and it looks pitted like a raisin, but it is grayish white in color. It is located proximal to both sides of the uterus at the lower abdomen. For its function, the ovaries produce, mature, and discharge the egg cells or ova. Ovarian function is for the maturation and maintenance of secondary sex characteristics in females. It also has 3 divisions: the protective layer of the epithelium, the cortex, and the central medulla. Another structure of the female internal organ is the fallopian tubes, or are the fallopian tubes. The fallopian tubes serve as a pathway of the egg cells towards the uterus, and it is a smooth hollow tunnel that is divided into 4 parts: the interstitial, which is 1 cm in length; the isthmus, which is 2 cm in length; the ampulla, which is 5 cm in length; and the infundibular, which is 2 cm long and shaped like a funnel. The funnel has small hairs called the fimbria that propel the ovum into the fallopian tube. And then the fallopian tube is lined with mucous membrane, and underneath is the connective tissue and the muscle layer. The muscle layer is responsible for the peristaltic movements that propel the ovum forward, and the distal ends of the fallopian tubes are open, making a pathway for conception to occur. Another organ of the internal female reproductive system is the uterus. The uterus is described as hollow, muscular, pear-shaped organ, and it is located at the lower pelvis, which is posterior to the bladder and anterior to the rectum. The uterus has an estimated length of 5 to 7 cm and width of 5 cm, and it is 2.5 cm in deep in its widest part. For non-pregnant women, it is approximately 60 grams in weight, and its function is to receive the ovum from the fallopian tube and provide a place for implantation and nourishment. It also gives protection for the growing fetus, and it is divided into 3: the body, the isthmus, and the cervix. The body forms the bulk of uterus, being the uppermost part, and this is also the part that expands to accommodate the growing fetus, wherein the isthmus is just a short connection between the body and the cervix. This is the portion that is cut during the cesarean section. And lastly is the cervix, that lies halfway above the vagina, and the other half extends into the vagina. And it has an internal and external cervical os, which is the opening into the cervical canal. This time, I'll be discussing about the menstrual cycle, what happens during the menstrual cycle, and what are the phases of the menstrual cycle. Females of reproductive age experience cycles of hormonal activity that repeat at about 1 month intervals. With every cycle, a woman's body prepares for potential pregnancy, whether or not that is the woman's intention. The term menstruation refers to the periodic shedding of the uterine lining, and menstru means monthly. The average menstrual cycle takes about 28 days and occurs in phases. So these phases are follicular phase, the ovulatory phase, which is the ovulation, and the luteal phase. There are four major hormones. These are the chemicals that stimulate or regulate activity of cells or organs involved in menstrual cycle. And they are the follicle stimulating hormone, the luteinizing hormone, estrogen, and progesterone. So the first one is the follicular phase of menstrual cycle. In this phase, it starts on the first day of your period, and during the follicular phase, the menstrual cycle, the following events occur. There are two hormones, follicular stimulating hormones and luteinizing hormone, or they call it as LH, and for the follicle stimulating hormone, they call it as FSH. And they are released from the brain and travel in the blood to the ovaries. The hormone stimulates the growth of about 15 to 20 eggs in the ovaries, and each in its own shell called follicle. So these hormones FSH and LH also trigger an increase in the production of the female hormone estrogen. As estrogen level rise like a switch, it turns off the production of the follicle stimulating hormone. And this careful balance of hormones allow the body to limit the number of follicles that mature. As the follicular phase progresses, one follicle in one ovary becomes dominant and continues to mature, and this dominant follicle suppresses all of the other follicles in the group. As a result, they stop growing and die. The dominant follicle continues to produce estrogen. In the ovulatory phase of the menstrual cycle, or what we call as the ovulation, it starts about 14 days after the follicular phase is started. The ovulatory phase is the midpoint of the menstrual cycle, with the next menstrual period starting about 2 weeks later. And during this phase, the following events occur. First is the rise in the estrogen from the dominant follicle triggers a surge in the amount of luteinizing hormone that is produced by the brain. Another activity, this is caused by the dominant follicle to release its egg from the ovary. And as the egg is released, that is a process called ovulation. It is captured by finger-like projection on the end of the fallopian tube. That is what we call as the fimbriae, and the fimbriae sweep the egg into the tube. Also during the phase, there is an increase in the amount and thickness of mucus produced by the cervix, which is the lower part of the uterus. And if a woman were to have intercourse this time, the thick mucus captures the man's sperm, nourishes it, and helps it move toward egg for fertilization. Another phase is the luteal phase of the menstrual cycle. So in this phase of the menstrual cycle, it begins right after the ovulation and involves the following processes. Once it releases its egg, the empty follicle develops into a new structure, and that is what we call as the corpus luteum. So the corpus luteum secretes the hormone progesterone. This progesterone prepares the uterus for fertilized egg to implant. If intercourse has taken place and man's sperm has fertilized the egg, that is a process called conception, the fertilized egg, or what we call as the embryo, will travel through the fallopian tube to implant in the uterus. and then the woman is now considered pregnant. If the egg is not fertilized, it passes through the uterus, not needed to support the pregnancy. The lining of the uterus breaks down and sheds, and the next menstrual period begins.